Hey there, folks. Welcome to Spectrum Pulse. We talk about music, movies, art, and culture. And today we're going to be talking about the newest album from Dessa called Chime. So I have covered a lot of truly excellent records this February, and yet I can't help but feel it's all been building up to this, the newest long-awaited solo album from one of my favorite ever MCs to take up the microphone, most notable for her work in the Doomtree Collective, but also for the diverse genre-twisting blend she brought to her own albums. And yet, I'll admit it, ever since I heard about Chime, I was nervous about it, mostly because Dessa's solo work is very different than the fire she typically spits on a Doomtree album. I might love A Badly Broken Code as an underrated near classic, but it's meditative and restrained in an uncanny way. It goes off on weird digressions, and it certainly took a lot of listens to grow on me as much as it did. And her 2013 follow-up, Parts of Speech, even though that record made my year-end list that year, it is a really damn good project. It was a pivot towards more indie R&B and less hip-hop, and I was a little bit unsure whether or not it played to enough of her strengths. She's an absolutely excellent MC, that can't be denied, but not quite as expressive or potent as a singer, at least not without the right production. And thus when I heard that her newest project, Chime, was pivoting even further, moving closer to mainstream accessible pop music, well, it's not like I couldn't have seen it coming, given her contributions to the Hamilton mixtape and her own wild creative ambition to be more than just a spitter, and I was sure that there was bound to be real density and punch in the content. And you know, it's not like Laserbeak or Cecil Otter would steer her astray in production. Okay, maybe I was worrying too much over nothing, I will admit that. But again, Dessa is an all-time favorite MC of mine. I really wanted this to be amazing, especially given some of the critical buzz about this project, and that she had brought in Andy Thompson to augment her sound with more classical elements, which sure would be an interesting contrast to what Laserbeak and Cecil Otter would typically give her. So, okay, what do we get on Chime? Well, folks, I'm going to be very honest with you. I was not expecting this at all. Deep down, I think I knew it was going to be great. I mean, it's Dessa. She's too smart and empathetic as an artist to do anything less, but I wasn't expecting the absolute gut punch that she delivered with Chime. Not just blending in elements of Baroque pop and ethereal electronics with her bars, but also showcasing the sort of deeply felt thematic cohesion and philosophical heft that for the first time on her work truly feels seamless with her emotional struggle and tightly knitted bars. Or let me put it like this. I re-listened to A Badly Broken Code before this review to confirm that yes, it is indeed a near classic, and yet Chime leaps past it handily, delivering the sort of layered impact that hits harder and harder with every single listen. In other words, this is bound to be one of the best of 2018, if not the best. It is truly transcendental. And yet I think if you're just coming from the Doomtree projects, Chime might throw you off balance. Because while Dessa's bars have never been better structured, there's a lot more singing on this project than driving double-time flows. Hell, if I were to make any one tiny criticism of the album, it would be that a song like the interlude Shrimp feels like a taster to an insane rap record we didn't get. And I can see that if that was your expectation, or if you weren't familiar with A Badly Broken Code or Parts of Speech, you might find yourself kind of disappointed that you didn't get what you wanted, or might find this a little bit too restrained or dour in its choice of pop textures, pulling on stately classical arrangements with rich cellos and fuzzy pianos or electronics that whir and sputter around it. And that's before you note the heavier, more melodic multi-tracking, or the vocal filters that might even seem like they're sapping more humanity from Dessa, about the last thing that you would think she'd want. And if that's not what you want to hear from Dessa, that sort of stylistic shift, I totally get it. I love when she snaps on a Doomtree project too, and her vocal stylings, they are not the most obvious fit for pop music until you recognize some of her reference points, oblique or otherwise. I mean, the two comparisons that immediately came to my mind the most were both indie pop and electronic artists, Vienna Tang and Imogen Heap, not just for a similar willowy vocal tone, but also how they had a tendency to bend electronics around their delivery to serve them in synthesis. And hell, it wouldn't be the first time that even a rapper has done this. Look at Kanye West's usage of autotune to highlight the emotive distance he was trying to enforce from his grief on 808s and Heartbreak, which is still kind of inspired in its own way. Of course, Kanye only wishes he could have the razor-tight cutting power of Dessa's content. And even before we get to the greater thematic weight, which I will discuss at length, I'm still a little bit in awe how Dessa can infuse every single song with so many quotable lines, symbolic juxtapositions, sly jabs, and the sort of detail that remains grounded enough to show careful thought, but also a level of accessibility that she's never really quite touched before. That's one thing that I argue some might have missed in her choice to go more for pop, where Parts of Speech each hit an odd middle ground of obliqueness, Chime's willingness to engage with more melody in a pop framework, it doesn't dumb down her style or her points of reference, but gives them the structure to connect a lot more deeply. Granted, the melodic hooks, they were always going to be strong. Catchiness seems embedded and baked into the DNA of every Doomtree member, but Dessa, she still coaxes through a lot of the fine details there. The haunted mantra of that ride coming keening through the bassy murk on ride, the thick smoky echo around the hook of fire drills to emphasize its lingering truth, a perfect contrast to the rattling guitar and classical embellishments to that seething final verse that breaks into a bassy, knocking outro that's really haunting. The ethereal but symphonic vocal layering that owes more to Enya on Good Grief and Boy Crazy capture both an exasperated purification ritual or flutters of genuine affection, to how Half of You almost plays like a Church's song with the quick tempo of the synth oscillation or the more developed percussion line. Even a song like Say When, more atmospheric with the desaturated keyboards and the unstable, blubbering beat, it uses the misty multi-tracking of that title to highlight the barroom loneliness as the champion has no more battles left to fight, the subtlest sort of tragedy and ones that shows a real glimpse of the other side of hip-hop mastery that's so rarely explored at this level of heartfelt conviction. Hell, every time even Eminem has tried it, it's never connected like this. And even as this album ends on a slightly darker, more melancholic note with I Hope I'm Wrong with its fluttery, airy fragments, there is still moments that capture a certain organic beauty amidst the electronics, with Velodrome being the most pronounced example. Yes, Dessa's voice doesn't lend itself to pop belting, but she doesn't do that, and it doesn't mean that she can't find beauty in a stunning strings arrangement, a thick cushion of multi-tracking to support her, and robotic layers highlighting how easy it is to slip in line, or if we're naturally conditioned for it. That's one thing I genuinely love about the production on this project. Not only is the writing so precisely detailed, but the mixing and the production is very much as well. Every choice was made with a reason, with the details feeling deliberate but still showing the raw humanity coursing beneath it. Hell, that's kind of why I like the ending pivot on Shrimp, where instead of Dessa dropping into the sort of bragging that she could do in her sleep, she throws a curveball and cuts it off with a laugh. Or how on Boy Crazy the staccato synth leads highlight the words that are never quite said, leading to rhymes that your mind will complete but can't be uttered aloud, especially in the wake of that song's final tragedy. And this is where we are going to have to delve into the content at length. And if you thought this record sounded pretty heavy and melancholy, even with some of its pop flourishes, it comes through the most in the actual content, as Dessa is not wasting an inch in her storytelling. The fact that she squeezes so many layers into her writing over just half an hour, that kind of blows my mind. I initially thought I wanted more length on this project, but repeated listens just exposed more details for me to absorb and unpack. There's a lot going on. And yeah, there is a lot to unpack here. Dessa has always been aware of being a woman in a traditionally male-dominated medium, and while she's always worked it into her content and some cutting asides, this time, she's not pulling any punches. And considering Dessa has always carried a level of maturity and realistic insight into her situation, it drills even deeper. Fire Drills has gotten the most attention for how she describes disguising her femininity to play in hip-hop, especially abroad in less progressive nations, to be seen as more than just eye candy handling the hooks, but then reflecting on what that conditioning has done to her psyche and femininity is a bitter pill that she's only really now confronting after it's all happened, especially when adhering to a traditional gender role just doesn't work for all women like her, and she's utterly sick of the message to women just to stay safe and restrain themselves rather than be brave and expect better out of their male counterparts. And yeah, that's powerful. But then you remember that just 2 songs earlier where Dessa's wandering back to an old haunt where old names were now being re-remembered, and then sees a girl looking to hook up with the wrong guy, but she doesn't ask her if she's alright because she knows the answer is going to be a lie anyways, and what business is it of hers to judge? Hell, she's aware of her own self-flagellating reckless tendencies, or to quote 5 of 6, getting her daily dose of lightning and probing power sockets so she can get buzzed enough to get me climbing up the kite string, which if you got the Benjamin Franklin reference, would just see her get shot again and again. And it's these moments, Dessa strips through the moralistic feminism in the same way that Mish Wade did with Paradise with the White Lung 2 years ago, and it was awesome then, but then Dessa goes even further, as this record opens up to a much more personal story. No, for the remaining 2/3 of the album, more of the story seems to be focused on heartbreak, specifically getting over it, which Yeah, sure, it isn't an unfamiliar topic in pop songs, but not only is Dessa aware of this, she's taking a more complex point of view. In the creation process of this record, she literally had her brain scanned and utilized EEG technology to identify the neural triggers in her mind that kept her feelings and compulsions so intact for her ex. And while there's no explicit reference to the science of it all, you can tell it was driving someone as pragmatic and driven as Dessa off the wall that she couldn't just close it off and let him go. Good grief references how the term is really just an oxymoron at any specific moment of pain. It only really feels like good grief in retrospect. And to quote her again, time has a funny kind of violence. It never leaves you the same way getting over that grief. Or to quote 5 of 6, being both the phoenix and the ash. And so much of that getting over it impulse, a lot of it is social conditioning. Jump rope might seem to be a trivial reflection of childhood until that first verse highlights that trained conditioning built into how little girls, even in their games, learn how to jump from that rope. And velodrome is even more pronounced, using a wonderful juxtaposition of medieval religious philosophy on how many angels could fit on the eye of a pin, and yet Dessa brings it down to earth by saying that any woman in stilettos could have told you that answer, highlighting the parallels of systems designed to control women, highlighting how technology has only enhanced that process, and then saying, sometimes I ring myself to see if I might chime. One of the rare sexual references on this record, but a kind of inspired one that shows Dessa finding a personal moment of release against those systems, independent on her own, and it is so worth it. That has that transcendent beauty. And yet even then, she's only human, and man, she knows it well. Once you're aware of your societal conditioning, you can't stop noticing it, and how many more questions it will then bring for you. I've already referenced the tragedy behind Boy Crazy, a powerful, aching compulsion she can't quite control and defies reason and goes then unrequited. But then you get Half a Heart, where she asks the question whether or not it's okay to hold on to that compelling emotion, all on her terms. Keep the messy emotion, because it's not like the experience is going away, so why not live with it and not feel lonely? But there is a reason that song is immediately followed by Say When, the lonely dive bar scene where all her friends have drifted away, and the only battles she remains fighting are her own shadows, her own mind, with the subtext of alcohol being the only numbing release she has, and we'll come back to that. And even if it means that it's falling in line, or to quote Aya Cash's character Gretchen from You're the Worst, maybe buying in is really the punk rock choice. In the course of making this record, that same EEG therapy and technology was used to partially neutralize those compulsions in Dessa's mind. And since Dessa knows her philosophy, she keeps the free will question in subtext, references on velodrome to being part machine, or at least steam power, and a callback to the fire that she references at her core. And then we have the closing track, I Hope I'm Wrong, referencing someone as if they were dead and hoping that she was wrong, that some attention still lingers even despite her lack of belief in what might come after, pouring out the bourbon both in respect and because she doesn't need it to numb her heart anymore. And even then, it shows her victory is kind of pyrrhic, and she can't help but wonder that if she had stepped in line even more, fallen in line with society, put his success above her dreams, trading them for children and society's projected domesticity, whether it would have been enough for her. Now, for now, that emotion remains close, the experience that she holds dear, but it doesn't control her anymore. And for as much agency as she believes she has, now it seems that Chime can really sing. Okay, look, I know some of you are going to say this is biased, that she's one of my favorite rappers, and that it can't possibly be that good, and yet with every listen it only confirmed it more. A fusion of organic and synthetic, fiery presence but icy precision, meticulously referenced but defiantly human and organic and emotional all the same. Taking the traditionally masculine coding of hip-hop with the feminine coding of pop music, Dessa's musing that it looks like gender's over rings as all the more symbolically prophetic for this album with every single re-listen, and with a level of nuance that reveals more depth with every listen, and the heartfelt hooks that empower to connect beyond it, even on a surface level. It's got that emotional tug. Yeah, I'm going there. It's a 10. Perfect score. Every song hits with startling raw beauty, a genre fusion that elevates the best of all of it. If we get a better record in 2018 than Chime by Dessa, it's gonna be a special year indeed. So yeah, without question, buy this album. I promise, you give it the time, you give it the thought, you will not regret it. And even beyond that, it's got that emotional pull. Yeah, it works. So so totally works. So yeah, thanks a lot for watching. If you'd like to like and subscribe, I'd be more than grateful. I know this review went long, but this is something special. Again, this is one of the best records I've ever covered on this channel. I don't give out perfect scores that often. And hey, the poll's up there, so I'm curious where you guys fall. I'm not expecting you guys to love it as much as I do. It connected. It's so lyrical. The emotive presence is so potent. It just gets there so effectively. And all the references interweave together so well. Thematically, it is so consistent. Again, it is something special. As a whole project, it is really something kind of magical, kind of transcendental, as I said before. And yeah, you want to buy the record, links in the description below. You're going to want to get this one. It's something special. I keep saying that. But yeah, if you guys want to support my channel or have anything else to do to improve my presentation, I'm all ears. And if you guys want to get involved in my scheduling process, link to my Patreon is right over there, where 3 times a week you guys get to vote on my schedule, and once a week for the higher tier contributors, you guys get to add albums, movies, or even a top 10 list to that schedule. And I got the Trailing Edge coming up, so we're going to knock off a good 8 to 10 records off that schedule, so stay tuned for that. But if you want to see my schedule, links on my Instagram. Check it down there. Till then, I'm Mark. You're watching Spectrum Pulse, and I'll see you next time.